Eggplant. It's one of those vegetables that you either love or hate. And in our house, we love them. But what we love about them is that they go so nice with Roma tomatoes, garlic, mozzarella, basil, olive oil, and salt. So what we like to do is we make a vegetarian dish. It can either be your main dish or your side dish, called eggplant caprese. Typically, we make this in the summer when eggplant is growing in our garden and we've got a lot of tomatoes and fresh basil, but it's December. So what we are going to be doing today is we're going to roast this in the oven, and we're going to be using a little bit of dried basil because it's what we have on hand. I will include the fresh basil in the recipe as well. But we're just going to go ahead and do this as a fantastic vegetarian meal prep that will still taste fantastic. Let's go ahead and set our oven to 425. Now let's go ahead and wash all of our vegetables. We're going to wash our eggplant. Place it over here to dry. We're going to wash up our tomatoes as well. And again, I just set them on a paper towel on one of those drying mats, as you can see here. And just leave those alone for a few minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll dry them up. Eggplant is one of those vegetables that has a lot of water content in it. So one of the things that I was always taught to do, and I don't know if this was because we grew up eating it fried, was that we take a paper towel and we lay it in a baking sheet and we add salt to the bottom of the paper towel. And then as we slice our eggplant, we're going to place it right on top of that paper towel with the salt. And then we're going to put another layer of salt and another layer of paper towel. And we're going to let this sit for about 15 minutes while our oven is heating up. We want to cut the ends off of our eggplant and discard them. These pieces are absolutely useless to us unless we're making a stock today. And if we were, I'd be throwing that right into my stock. Now let's go ahead and cut our eggplant. We're going to try and cut this in thicker slices than we would if we were frying it. So you can see we've sliced our eggplant. Everything here is now cut into as uniform shape as I can possibly get it. And then we're going to resalt each eggplant. And then we're going to cover it with a layer of paper towel and leave this be. Here we've got our other layer on top. Now, you can also press into it and watch and see what happens when I press on it. A lot of times you'll see water start to collect. See how you can see it's kind of even coming out of the eggplant as we speak. So back in the days when my friend's grandmother would cook Italian, she would call this squeezing the eggplant. You'd squeeze the water out of the eggplant. Again, that was because they were frying a lot of this. For us, we just want the eggplant to be able to roast nicely and not really boil. Typically, as I mentioned before, this is a summer dish, and we make this on the grill, and the eggplant gets beautiful grill marks. But we thought, why can't we just roast this in the oven? I think it'll taste fantastic. You're probably wondering, what about those tomatoes that we washed along with that eggplant? And here we have it. We also are going to be roasting the tomatoes. I like to roast them or grill them because they have a much nicer flavor. They're sweeter, less acidic when you do that. And in order to do this, we're going to slice them in half and scoop the middle out of the tomato. The technique that I like to use is by making a little V cut right at the edge of the tomato on that side. And then using my knife, I come around the other side as well before we scoop. Now we'll come in and just scoop out that inside of the tomato, and we'll fill them all up in this bowl. We're going to throw away the inside of the tomato. All we want is the meat and the skin. You can see here how these are coming out. And there's the stuff that we didn't want. We've salted our tomatoes. And now we're ready to put everything into the oven. But first, we need to take our eggplant and remove it from the paper towels. And you'll kind of get an idea of how much water came out of that. See? That's how much water we removed from the eggplant. Make sure you've got your eggplant on a Silpat or some parchment paper if you're going to roast them. And we're going to also roast the tomatoes. And I'll show you that in just a second. And again, if you want to get an idea of how much water came out of that eggplant, you can see it right there. All right, so remember, it already has salt on it, so we don't have to salt it. But what we do before we put it in the oven is we're going to put olive oil. Let's go ahead and bring that over here to where we're going to put it in the oven and drizzle olive oil all over our eggplant. Generously sprinkle. And we may, halfway during cooking, sprinkle a little more. Let's get those into the oven, shall we? Let's get our tomatoes onto our other baking sheet with our Silpat. And again, we already salted these. But what we might want to do here, this might be a good place to go ahead and when we add our little bit of olive oil to these, we could put maybe some basil, some of that dried basil. Normally, if we were making these outdoors on the grill, we would hold the basil until the very end. But I'm thinking, since we're roasting them in the oven, let's go ahead and just add a little bit of this basil and let that cook right into that flavor of the tomato. Now, if you were using garlic powder instead of fresh garlic, I would put that on the tomato as well. But what we're going to do is we're going to take this garlic and we're going to roast it. I always put it in a little piece of tin foil with some with some olive oil. And then we'll plop that right on this same little tray and just roast that up. So we've cut just the tip off of our garlic. We left the skin on and we left the bottom half. And I just grab a piece of tin foil and we'll just pour some olive oil on that. I'll show you that. Set it down here. And just a drizzle of olive oil. And then I just close this up. I'll just let that roast alongside my tomatoes. Let's go ahead and get those in the oven as well. All right, we've drizzled them. Now let's get them back in the oven. This time I'm just going to set them on that upper rack while they finish for about 10 more minutes. Now, what are we going to do with the tomatoes? So, as you can see, I'm going to kind of give you an idea. They are still firm enough to work with, but you can see that the membrane has started to broken down just a little bit. That means that they are done. And boy, I can smell this garlic. So I know that the garlic has roasted the way that I want it to. So we're going to take a peek at that. See if I can. You can see the garlic. Now we could let that go for a little bit longer, but I think that's going to be just fine. And what we're going to do is we're going to transfer these roasted tomatoes back into that bowl where we had all of the innards that we threw away. And then we're going to mix them up with the garlic. Now, if the garlic is cooked enough, we should be able to just squeeze it and it'll pop out of these little pods. Look at, see how that just popped out? There we go. And now we'll be able to just take a knife and a fork and chop this up, add in any other seasoning that we want, because this is going to go on top of our eggplant with a little bit of that mozzarella cheese, and it's going to be fantastic. The method that I like to use is just a simple fork and a serrated steak knife, and just come in here and move them apart and just chop all of this up together. Depending on how well your garlic is cooked, the size of your cloves, you may need to cut the garlic separately. Just take it down onto your cutting board that you're working with and just go ahead and chop it up. But look how beautiful this sauce is that's going to go over our eggplants. We're going to give it just a taste in a minute and see how we need to season. All right, I'm going to just get a little bit of this and just see where we're at. It's lovely. It doesn't need any salt. If you wanted more garlic, you could add some garlic salt here. I don't think it needs it. I think it's going to allow the eggplant to shine. Speaking of the eggplant, let's go back and check in on it. All right, I don't like to let my eggplant get too dark because I don't want it to become bitter. But what I'm looking for is just a little bit of give in the eggplant itself. So how I usually do this, if it was the grill, we'd be using some tongs, right? So I just pull out my tongs because I don't want to burn my hands and see if I squeeze them, do they have give to them? And they do. Look, now I know my eggplant is cooked. So that took about 25 minutes in the oven total. We got it nice and browned, and we have the eggplant completely cooked all the way through. So you have a couple of options when it comes to assembling your eggplant caprese. In here, we had our tomatoes, which were fantastic. We can always add just a little bit more olive oil to that, make them a little bit what I would consider creamier. We can drizzle a little bit of balsamic vinegar in there, which will give it a little tang, or we can wait until we put it all together and put a little drizzle of the balsamic on the top, which is the way I prefer to do it. You also can decide whether you want to put the tomato on first and then the cheese, or the cheese on first and then the tomato. Today, I'm feeling, let's put the tomato on the bottom. Why not? We'll take a little bit of our tomato mixture and we'll just place it right here on the top with our fork. Do a little bit more if you like. And again, it's up to you. How much tomato you want on the top of yours, just all depends. If you didn't want to take the time to roast the tomatoes, I'm sure you could have used maybe a canned tomato, or you could have used some tomato sauce. And I'm going to take just a piece of that mozzarella. I'm going to put it over the top, and I'm going to sprinkle it with just a little bit of basil. And I'm going to take and just see if I can get a drizzle of balsamic to come out of there. And that would make a lovely vegetarian dish. You could put two together if it was going to be the full meal. This could be a side dish. Again, you could make it and eat it cold. We do this all the time. It's fantastic as a salad as well. We hope you enjoy the roasted eggplant caprese. If you wanted to meal prep these and set them aside to have them cold later in the week, makes a fantastic lunch or side dish that you can serve to your family. You can always heat them in the microwave just for a few minutes, just till they reach 145 in temp, if you're going to do that, or eat them cold. It's really important that when you reheat items in the microwave, or any time you're reheating something, that it gets to the temperature of 145 to keep it out of the food danger zone. You're okay eating it cold. Cold is fine. So germs grow in between certain temperature zones, and we've talked about that in some of our classes. But again, so if you wanted to do this family style, here you have a nice vegetarian family style dish.